Okay, hello, my name is Anthony Beshai. I attend Archangel Michael Church in Santa Ana, and thanks to Grace, I'm lucky enough to come and talk to you guys about my experience with the MCAT, and I'm going to kind of go over everything I wish I knew prior to have taken the MCAT. So a little bit about me. I'm a fourth-year human biology major at UCI. I plan on applying to medical school at the end of June. And I took my MCAT just this September, so it's still very fresh, still very new. And while it's still in my mind, I wanted to kind of get this information out. So prior to taking my MCAT, I studied for 3 months. About 80% of what I did over those 3 months was studying for this MCAT. So I'm kind of going to detail my experience with it and go over everything I wish I knew, so hopefully that your guys' journey is a little easier. So before we do that, I'm just going to go over the very basics. So what is the MCAT? The MCAT is a standardized test created by AAMC that is used for medical school admissions in both the United States and Canada. So it's used in both osteopathic and allopathic medical schools, so both the DO and MD schools. So the test is passage-based. It's given over a computer. So what I mean by passage-based, they're going to give you a passage, about 3 paragraphs or so. It might be more, it might be less, right? And you're supposed to combine what you know with what the passage gives you to answer the questions, right? So overall, the MCAT is based on concepts, not the little details. A lot of people say everything you need to know is in the passage, right? It might not be obvious, but it is in the passage, and you're supposed to answer solely using the passage, right? But it's very important you still know the concepts. What I found to be most effective is if you're strong with the concepts, you can combine what the passage says with what you already know to answer the questions, and that's when it becomes a lot easier, and you become more successful. So the total amount of time that the MCAT takes is 7.5 hours. It's a very long test, and by the end of it, you're going to be exhausted and your head is going to hurt. But that's what it's practice for. You have to practice taking a lot of 7.5-hour tests so that you start building up the stamina and endurance so that test isn't so hard and your brain can handle it. So the MCAT consists of 4 sections. Section number 1, the first section, is chemical and physical foundations of the biological system. So it goes over, we'll go over all of these sections in detail. Second section is critical analysis and reasoning skills. So that's the reading section. Third section is the biological and biochemical foundations of living systems. Fourth section is the psychological, social, and biological foundations of behavior. So basically, psychology and sociology. Again, we'll go over these all in detail. So how does the scoring work for the MCAT? The MCAT has 4 sections like we just went over. Each section consists of 132 points, right? So when you add up all 4 sections, the max score that you can get is 528. And if you were to get the minimum score on every single section, you would get 472. Right? So the MCAT itself is graded on a bell curve, right? So that means the scores could be curved up or it could be curved down. And what they're trying to do is make the mean score or the average score about 500. So if you are higher than that average score, you're going to get curved up. I apologize. Basically, it's graded on a curve, and sometimes the curve can help you and sometimes it won't. So the MCAT average for applicants is between 504 and 505. So what that means is basically of all the people that apply, of the hundred thousands of people that apply to medical school, if you take all of them collectively, that average score is 405 to 505, right? Now, if you're looking at the medical students that got enrolled or got accepted into the medical school, the average is about 510. These averages are dependent on states, it's dependent on schools, right? So a school might have a lower average, it could be 508 average, and a school might have a higher average, a 515 average, but collectively as a nation, the average medical student has a 510 that is accepted. So basically when I was going into it, It took me a while to find these stats, but based off the stats, my goal was a 510. I think that's a pretty solid goal. Anywhere between 508 and 510 is pretty solid score. Anything above that is really good, in my opinion. Obviously, it depends on your GPA, right? If you have a higher GPA, you don't have to do as well on the MCAT, right? If you have a lower GPA, then you have to do better on the MCAT. So these scores are a lot fluid. There's a whole range of scores that get in, like 504 can get in if they have a great MCAT, or if you have a terrible GPA but you have a 512, for example, you have a good chance of getting in. So it's just important that the GPA, if you're struggling with a GPA, that the MCAT compensates for it, or if you're struggled with the MCAT, that your GPA compensates for it. Okay, we'll talk about registering for the MCAT in case anybody is confused. So right now on my computer, I'm going over the PowerPoint. I made. This PowerPoint will be added when this video goes up, so that you guys can access this PowerPoint as well. So this PowerPoint is embedded with all the links that I'm looking at. So whatever link I'm talking about, it's in this PowerPoint. So if you're confused, you can just open the PowerPoint and click on the link, and it'll take you directly to the website I'm talking about. So yeah, I put the website where you can register on. It's very easy. There's no application. There's no resume that you have to submit to take the MCAT. All you have to do is sign up, right, and pay the fee, and you're signed up for the MCAT, right? One thing that's very important is you register early, right? Spots to take the MCAT fill up very fast, right? And so I know people that live in Orange County or like Santa Ana who had to take it in Las Vegas and Chicago and North California and all over the nation just because they didn't register early, right? So the spots in Southern California are very limited. So again, it's very important that you guys register early. So how do you know when they're going to release the registration dates? So if you're planning on taking your test anywhere between July to September, the earliest you can register for it is somewhere February 2019. If we're talking about the July to September test dates. The exact date is announced on the AAMC Twitter. So AAMC is the company that makes the MCAT. So they have a Twitter, right? And so I put the Twitter handle in the PowerPoint. So if you go on their Twitter, they're going to announce the exact date that you can sign up for those to register for those classes. So it's important that you follow them on Twitter, or you look at their Twitter every once in a while, so that you know exactly what's happening. So let's break down each section, see what it consists of, and see what you have to know prior to going into that section. So the first section of the test is the chemical and physical foundations of biological systems, right? So again, every section is passage-based, so they give you 9 to 11 passages. I'm not exactly sure. I think actually it's 11. 11 passages for a total of 59 questions, right? So there's about 9 questions a test that are freestanding questions that don't require passages. So that's solely based on your concept and your content review. So it's important to know your content. And then you have 9 passages where they ask you questions based off that passage. So like I said before, it combines what you know, what you learned during your content review, and what the passage says, and together, if you combine those two things, you can effectively answer the question. So what does this section cover, right? It covers organic chemistry, physics, and general chemistry. And so the classes you should take prior is probably general chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics. Now, all of these topics are important, right? But the topic that's very important that they test on the most is general chemistry. Organic chemistry and physics both show up. Usually the physics is on the easier side. Organic chemistry shows up a little bit less than general chemistry. it's important to know everything still, because you don't know, every test is different. Some tests like might have no organic chemistry or one passage of organic chemistry, and some tests might have three. Like personally, my test had 3 organic chemistry passages, and I hate organic chemistry, so I saw that and I was kind of sad. So you have to know everything, but it's important to know that the most important topic they talk about is general chemistry. So your content for general chemistry, your content review for general chemistry has to be strong. You have to understand all of those main concepts. Now, critical analysis and reasoning skills. So again, this is a passage-based question. There are 9 passages in this section for a total of 53 questions. This section is a little bit shorter. It's 1 hour and 30 minutes. So to be 100% honest, this is a section where if English is your second language, you're gonna struggle with this the most, right? The passages are very dense. They're very hard reading, even for American-born test takers. So this is going to be the hardest section, and I know multiple people that came here who are Egyptian when they came here when they were 12, 14, 15, etc. This is the section they struggled with the most. It's very hard even if you're a native-born English speaker, let alone if English is your second language, right? So it's not impossible, right? This is the one that takes the most work, and you have to practice, and you have to practice over a long period of time, right? Because these passages are unique. They make them confusing on purpose. They want to see how you deconstruct the information and answer the questions. So what I would recommend, so for example, say you're taking your test in September, right? And this is a hard fact. I'm taking my test in September. I already registered. I signed up. I would start in March, okay? I would do 3 passages a day, right? 3 MCAT reading passages with the questions a day, right? Every single day until your test, right? So, obviously, when you start studying for the MCAT and that's all you're doing, say you're taking in September, and from June to September is when you're hard studying for the MCAT, and from March to June is when you have classes, right? I would say from March to June, try to do 3 to 4 passages a day. Consistently, right? Because that's when you're going to start to see things rise. It's not going to rise evenly, right? You might rise a little bit, then plateau, then rise a little bit, then plateau. The most important thing is you're going to see it eventually rise, and it's going to take practice over a long period of time, because you're going to start realizing trends, you're going to start realizing themes, you're going to start realizing how the MCAT likes to write their questions, different stuff like that. So you have to start breaking it down early if you think you're going to struggle with it, and just constantly reading. Start reading books that are very dense, right? If you Google lists of MCAT books to read specifically for cars, you're going to find a whole bunch of lists, right? You have to just start getting in that mindset of just reading very confusing, dense stuff, because it's going to help you, right? Another recommendation is reading newspapers like The Economist. I know The Economist is particularly hard to understand. Maybe if you start reading The Economist, the article every morning, you're going to start learning and start getting used to reading hard articles, hard stuff, and it's going to make your cars experience a lot easier. So again, on this PowerPoint, I added useful links of passages that you can practice. But yeah, so if you want those passages, and if you want to click on those links, it'll take you to the websites and the document that have those passages. And I would recommend just start practicing from now. It's never too early. All right, next section: biological and biochemical foundations of living systems, aka just the bio section, right? So this section consists of 59 questions. You have an hour and 35 minutes, just like your chemistry and physics section. It covers all of biology, in physiology, right? So how the body works. Theoretically, it's supposed to be half biology and half physiology, but sometimes you can get a test that's more biology than physiology. It's really dependent on the test writers. So classes you should take prior to taking the section in the MCAT. Definitely general biology. That's very important, right? Molecular biology, physiology. Physiology is very important, so I would recommend taking a physiology class closer to when your test date is, right? So if you're taking it in September, like my example was saying, then maybe take it in that spring quarter or in that spring semester prior to when you're planning on studying. So that way that info is fresh in your head and you can spend a little less time on content review. Genetics shows up. It's not one of the high yielding topics, but it does show up. And then biochemistry. They love biochemistry. So if you're good with biochemistry, then good for you. But if you're not, I would take a class. I would struggle with it. I would learn it in that class, right? So when you get to studying for your MCAT, it's a little easier. But like I said, they love biochemistry. So make sure you know your amino acids and different biochemical lab techniques and the content behind biochemistry, because they test on that very heavily. In the last section, this section is the newest. It's the psych-soc section. So psychology and sociology. For short, people just call it psych-soc. This is, again, 59 questions, 1 hour and 35 minutes. It's, again, passage-based. So it's basically on psychology and sociology. They don't expect you to know it in as much detail as you would, per se, like a psychology major or a sociology major. They want you to know the main concepts and not the details. But again, for example, this is a section that I struggled with the most, just because I had never taken a psychology or sociology class, right? So I had to learn all of this content. It was a lot of content. I had to learn it, and the passages themselves aren't straightforward. It's not like gonna ask you just straightforward questions. Like, you have to combine what you know with the passage. So this is the section that I struggled with a lot. Depending on who you ask, again, it's very subjective what people think is easy or what they think is hard. But depending on who you ask, some people might say this is easier. This is the easier section, right? It's just psychology and sociology. It's not biology or chemistry or whatever. But again, this is a section I struggled with a lot. I would recommend taking it seriously and practicing that section a lot. Again, I put some links in the PowerPoint, so if you open up the links, it's going to take you to some PDFs that have all of the content that could be tested on it. One of them is like 300 pages or something like that. It's a very dense, very long document. And then the other one is a lecture series that one of the test prep companies did. I personally started off with a 300-page PDF. It was taking me too long, and I felt like I wasn't understanding everything, and I felt like it was too detailed. So then I moved towards the lectures from Princeton, and I put the link on this PowerPoint. So if you want to look at those lectures, go ahead. And I just learned those, right? And one thing for this section also, if you're learning the definition, you have to learn it word for word for word, right? You can't just think like, oh, I'm going to be able to recognize this, right? Because they're going to try to confuse you with two different theories that are similar, right, but are different because there's a small detail, right? So you have to know every single detail of each theory. So how can you MCAT prep? So basically, from a broad standpoint, there's two options, right? You can self-study or you can take a test prep company. And so I'll let you know what I took a test prep company. The positives of taking a test prep company is they provide you with a schedule of events, right? Like, if you're going into this to self-study, it's going to be very confusing determining that schedule and when to study and different things like that. So they provide you with that schedule, which could be very valuable to you in your pursuit. But again, say you have a friend that took the MCAT and they did pretty well on it. You can ask them, like, what do you think I should study? They can start helping you make the schedule, because by the end of taking your MCAT, you're going to know what's important and what's not important, right? But at the beginning, like, I remember myself, like, in June, I had no idea where to start. I was looking at all the content lists. It was so broad. I just didn't know where to start, right? So that's kind of where the test prep company came in handy, was they gave me a very structured thing. However, if I were to look at it going back, I probably could have self-studied, right? I could have done my research earlier. I could have developed understood what I need to know and developed my own schedule, right? So it's definitely plausible. So to self-study, you're going to have to purchase a set of books. Either you purchase the Kaplan books, the Princeton books, or the Exam Cracker books. I personally use the Exam Cracker books. They're very good. Their pictures and tables and stuff are very detailed. I have also linked a copy of the PDF in this PowerPoint. So again, if you open up the PowerPoint and press on that link, it's towards the end of the PowerPoint, you will get the Exam Cracker PDFs. But again, so half of the MCAT is half content and half of it is content application. We kind of talked about this before. So it's important that you dedicate part of your schedule to learning the facts, right? The concepts, the facts, the details, all that stuff. I'm going to have to learn it. I'm going to learn it well, right? And then the second half of what I'm going to do is apply that content to the practice questions. And we'll talk about what certain practice questions you can do. But again, if you're confused about the list of topics, like the specific topics that the MCAT expects you to know, I added the link from the AAMC website themselves, so that's probably the best resource you can have, because AAMC, again, is the person that writes the MCAT. So I just click on that link and see what what you have to do, and then start making a schedule. Like, obviously, if I took biochemistry and I got an A, and I'm very good at that stuff, and I'm very good at amino acids, I'm not going to spend as much time on amino acids. Say I never took like organic chemistry, or I hate organic chemistry, I'm gonna spend more time on organic chemistry. Like a major con of the test prep companies is that they spend equal amounts of times on every single subject, right? Because they're assuming, like, oh, if you're strong on this, right, some person's going to be weak on it. Or if you're weak on this, some person's going to be strong on it. So we're just going to cover it in detail for everyone, right? But when you're self-studying, you can make your own schedule. If I'm strong on something, I'm going to spend a lot more time on that thing. Or, sorry, a lot less time on that thing. And if I'm weak on something, I'm going to spend a lot more time on that thing. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to both, right? So different test prep companies you can go through is Kaplan, Princeton, Berkeley Review. Depending on who you're going to ask, they're either going to love that or hate it, right? Some people take Princeton, you'll talk to one person and they say, oh yeah, I hated it, right? And then you'll talk to another person and they're like, yeah, it was okay, it was good. I feel like it adequately prepared me. So it's very, very subjective, right? So this is stuff that you kind of have to research yourself, see what ones like fit your style of learning and teaching if you're planning on taking a test prep. Kaplan and Princeton, I can tell you this, are more concept based, right? Like the broad concepts, and less detail oriented. The Berkeley Review is more detail oriented and less also concept based, but they spend a lot of time on the little nitty gritty details. So whatever you think fits your style of learning, I would go towards that course if you're planning on taking a test prep company. But again, I would do a little more research past what I'm giving you, because this is a lot of money. And if you read different posts and stuff like that, you'll see what people liked about certain things and what people didn't like. And then finally, there's Khan Academy. So I bet if you're watching this, you have used Khan Academy for different classes. They release so many videos on YouTube and on their website. They also partnered with the AAMC to release videos for the MCAT, right? So it's a really, really, really good tool, right? So if you go to a class and say you're taking a test prep company, right? Or say you're self-studying, right, and you read the section about amino acids, right, and you're confused, you're still kind of confused, then I'm going to go to Khan Academy and I'll look up the video that talks about amino acids in their MCAT section, and I'm going to reinforce what I read with what their video says, and hopefully you're going to get a full circle idea of what the concept is, and be a little more prepared when it comes to amino acids. So again, AMC is a company that writes MCAT. They actually release their own resources, right? So they release section banks, question banks, and they release 3 full-length practice tests and 1 sample test. So a total of 4 tests. This, I can't stress this enough. This is the most important resource that you can purchase or you can use. This is the company that writes the test, right? So it's going to be very similar to how the actual test is, right? Obviously, there's different, they write different tests for different dates, but it's still going to be very similar. For example, one of the question bank passages I read through twice. It just happened to be one that I read through twice, right? When I was taking my actual MCAT, the passage itself was a little different, but I know for a fact they copy and pasted one of the paragraphs from the question bank onto that test. And so when I was reading it, I was a lot more prone to get the answer right, I feel like, because that was my 3rd time reading that particular section. So yeah, like I was saying, it's very important. I would recommend going through every question they offer twice, right? Go through it once, see what you... it's very important to see why you got an answer wrong, right? And start identifying different patterns in how they ask their questions. But also very importantly is to go through and see why you got an answer right. I think we've all been in the position where you kind of guessed on a question, you didn't really know, there was no reason for you answering it, and it happened to be right. Like, if you encounter that kind of thing in the MCAT, it's very important to understand why I got a question right, as well as why I got a question wrong, right? Because maybe in like 10 questions down the line, you're not going to be so lucky and you're going to get it wrong. So, definitely try to understand each question, the patterns of how they ask questions, why I got a question right versus why I got it wrong. So yeah, I feel like that will be very helpful. That's definitely what helped me. I didn't go through the questions twice, but I think if I went through the questions twice, it would have helped my score even more than because my score went up a lot just going through all of that content and full lengths and stuff like that, because I started to learn like how they ask their questions. I started to see trends in their passages and trends in how they ask questions and certain stuff like that. Another thing that you're going to start realizing that AMC loves to do is put one question that seems so right. So they're going to put it there and they're going to try to bait you, right? And you're going to be like, oh, yeah, this is the answer. I know for 100% fact, right? And you'll click it and you'll get it wrong, right? So one thing I learned is it's very, very, very important to read the answer, and then that's it. Just read it, then read the next answer. That's it. Think about like why it could be wrong or right. But the most important thing is to read all 4 answers and think about them critically, and don't cross it out, or like don't cross it out until you've identified a reason why it could be wrong, right? Don't just click A because you think, oh, this is a great answer, right? Like I did that a lot at the beginning, right? Like I would get to either A and B and I'll be like, yep, that's 100% the answer. Let's keep going. I'm going to save me some time on this one. But that's when I realized, like, I have to prioritize every single answer choice because sometimes they're trying to bait me, and sometimes it looks like the right answer, but it's not. And when I read all the answer choices, I'm gonna start realizing like, oh, maybe this one's right. Oh, I didn't look at this detail in A that might make it wrong. And so it's just most important that you pick the most right answer. You might argue like, oh, they're both right. Like if I look at it this way, it could be right, and if I look at the other one, it could also be right. But like their whole concept or their whole thing is the most right answer, and that's what makes this test challenging. This test is challenging. Yeah. So again, I put a link in the PowerPoint to where you can purchase those materials. It's by far the most important thing that you could do to prepare. So I definitely recommend clicking on that link and looking at it and deciding which bundle you want to get, if you want to get a bundle. But yeah. Other useful resources. So UWorld, there's a test prep company called UWorld. They don't teach classes, but they write a bunch of questions. I put the link to their website. They have a 15-day free access where you can access any of their questions for free, so definitely take advantage of it. It's very, 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 very helpful for Psych Soc. So I would recommend, if you're struggling with Psych Soc, even if you're not struggling, Psych Soc is a section that you can get a really good score on. If you're not struggling, or if you are struggling, try their 15-day free access. They have about 300 Psych Soc questions, and go through all of them, right? You can definitely do that in the 15 days. And you're not paying for anything, and it's going to legitimately help your score. I didn't personally do any of their bio or chemistry and physics questions, but I heard they were good. So if you have time in that 15-day free access, I would try those questions too. But yeah, definitely take advantage of the 15-day free access. I did all of their Psych Soc questions in that time slot, and I did it for free because it's a free trial. Next is next step tests, right? So some people say it's very important you take 10 practice tests before you take the actual MCAT. I personally took 7. So I mean, it's important, right? And if I were to do it again, I probably would take more. But again, AAMC only gives you 4 practice tests. So I bought some of the next step tests because they're the most similar to AAMC in my opinion. Like the Princeton tests are so ridiculously hard. Kaplan tests are too easy. So I thought next step was very similar to how AAMC is. So I purchased some of their tests. Again, they give you 1 free practice test, so take advantage of that. Maybe have that be the first test you take. Reddit. So I don't know if you guys have been on Reddit for other things, but there's a huge community of MCAT takers on Reddit. They post a lot of helpful links and a lot of helpful resources that you can utilize. So I would definitely look up MCAT Reddit and go to that page and just start reading what people's experiences are, the resources that they put up there, because it's going to help you with your test. I put a MCAT review sheet on here, so it's a 100-page doc that you guys can look at. It's going to help you with like all the content. I put the PDF of the exam cracker books, all of them. So if you want to look through those books, you can just click on the link and it'll take you to the folder. Yeah. So that's all I have to talk. I have put my email on the last slide of this PowerPoint. I think it'll also go up with the post. I have gone through it, and by the grace of God, I was pretty successful. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll try to respond to you as fast as I can and be as helpful as I can. But yeah, I went through it in June, so I know kind of how the system works. So yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and I'll get back to you. I also added my phone number to the PowerPoint as well. So yeah, thank you for your time. That's pretty much all that I have to cover. So if you have any questions, just feel free to email me. Thank you.